program is part of the Scene Project's podcast network. The Scene Project features interviews with independent musicians, comedians, and artists from across the Midwest. Become part of our community and support local art wherever you are. Welcome into another exciting episode of The Scene. I'm your host, Bubba Startz, and with me today from Source of Sources, Peter Shankman. Peter, welcome to the show.
Good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Well, I'm excited to chat with another community builder. I've been using your platform for the last couple of weeks. It's really been a game changer for us here at the Scene Projects. But before we get into all of that, I'd love to just kind of give you the floor and let you give us a little bit of your backstory.
Sure. So, it's always interesting. I wasn't supposed to be doing any of this. I grew up born and raised New York City kid, grew up with two musical parents. I went to high school performing arts, was in graduate school studying fashion and portrait photography, lost my financial aid. The government said, your parents make too much money. We're taking away your financial aid. I sent them back a letter that said my parents do make too much money. However, they keep it. Government didn't find that funny. So moved back home to New York City, was hanging out in the mid-90s, was hanging out in a chat room that part of something called America Online, which if any of your listeners are under 35, they're not going to know what that is. I went, someone in that chat room said, hey, my company's trying to build a newsroom. I said, sure, I have no experience. I have a journalism degree from Boston University, no experience. I'll be great. Wound up getting hired to launch the AOL newsroom down in Virginia. And that was my first and only real job. I worked for AOL for about 3 years, moved back to New York City in the late 90s when the dot-com boom was taking off, realized that I could move a lot faster than a lot of the stoic sort of old agencies, launched a PR firm, blew it up in the dot-com boom, sold it a couple of years later, did very well, tried to take a year off, lasted about a week, realized I didn't know how to relax, blamed my parents, started consulting for several years, running around in my late 20s, early 30s, sort of just having fun, working for different companies all around the world. Eventually realized that I talk to everyone. A lot of that's because I'm massively ADHD. And when in talking to everyone, I have a huge Rolodex, just people who know me, people who, I'd meet and on the airplanes. So finally, journalists just started saying, hey, you know everyone. I'm doing a story on whatever. Who do you know? And that led to my building a database called, at the time, Help a Reporter Out. Now it's Source of Sources. And essentially, this database was filled with hundreds of thousands of people I'd met over the years. And it kept growing and growing. And when a journalist needed a source on deadline for any media outlet, New York Times, Wall Street Journal, Oprah, whatever, they'd use my service. And it was totally free on both sides. It still is. Eventually, I sold it and took some time off, wrote some books, got married, had a kid, got divorced, still have the kid. Journalists kept calling me and sources kept calling me, hey, that thing you built that's not as great anymore now that you're not running it, would you ever consider starting it again? I said, no. And eventually they bothered me enough that I said yes. So now, in addition to the several other things I do, I have another full-time job. I run sourceofsources.com, which is about a 50,000 person mailing list where twice daily we send out emails to entrepreneurs, small businesses, marketing firms, PR firms, whatever. And these emails have queries from journalists all over the world. And if you can answer any of the queries in these emails, you do directly to the journalist, and you can get quoted the same day, next day in major newspapers. You can go on television, whatever, and it's totally free. So that, in addition to 100 million other things, is what I do on a daily basis.
Yeah, well, like you, I wasn't supposed to be doing this. So finding that database and introduced to it from another, podcast guest or just someone that I had a discovery call, shout out to Paige. Thank you. And it means a lot, right? I was, equating to you off camera and our followers who know me, I was a welder a few years ago and quit my job to pursue this because I saw a need for, especially in the music community, even though I was a musician myself, like there's nobody out there that was really pumping those up. I had released the song and, I did the local radio. I live in rural South Dakota, so not a lot of media outlets anyway. And so I did like the radio, the 2 news stations, and then like the media tour was over. And it was like, well, there's got to be more than this. And I was a big podcast fan, obviously listened to a lot of Joe Rogan, but also followed Kill Tony and Tony Hinchcliffe's program. And to that, I was like, man, he's doing nothing but helping independent comedians. Why couldn't you be doing that in the music world? And granted, I wasn't doing the live show, although I have developed some form of that we call the Songwriter Showcase now. It was just getting reps and starting to talk to people. You know, one of my first handful of interviews was Bill Payne from the band Little Feat, you know, someone who's been in the music business forever. And they were coming through Sioux Falls, South Dakota. And they found me because I was one of the only media outlets focusing on the music business. So it was really, it took off very fast. We did 100 episodes in 9 months. Now we have over 400 episodes out there, 1,500 uploads on YouTube, 350,000 views. So it really took off on me before I knew necessarily what I was doing. So to stumble into all of this, I've needed these networks and these different places to kind of fall into to get my bearings and to kind of find out what I'm doing. It's not necessarily always about the stories or what we're doing, but it's about communicating with people who have been in, publicists and all of these people. And I'm kind of working in a lot of these spaces that I have no idea and no experience with. Right. So it's been nice just to kind of, you know, throw a line out there. I equate it to fishing. You never know what you're going to get, but you cast your line out there. This email gets sent through. The first one I did, I got 3-4 responses that same day. And now you're having conversations. And do I need, you know, am I looking for a story every week? No, but once a month I throw my line out there. Hey, this is kind of what we're looking for, business or media professionals that are willing to talk to us. At the very least, they're gaining another contact in the media world and having a story put out about them. And I'm gaining some valuable experience and knowledge from people who have maybe been doing it a lot longer.
The fishing analogy definitely confirmed that you are from South Dakota. So we're good.
Well, and without the internet and without meeting people like you who have been, you know, working to build these communities since, you know, the late 90s in the tech boom, I would never have gotten as far as I have. Now, AI has had a bit to do with that as well on, you know, the editing side and helping us, you know, craft media pitches and decks and a lot of things like that. Obviously, I have no problem talking. I knew this on-camera part was going to be very easy for me. It's really been all the stuff that nobody else sees that's been my education and what's taken time to kind of get used to.
It is crazy how, you know, turns of events happen and the next thing you know, you're doing something completely unrelated. You know, not a day goes by where I don't think back to like high school. I went to high school at Performing Arts, right? I graduated with Marlon Wayans, with Omar Epps, with Jennifer Aniston, with Adrian.
What happened to your career?
Yeah, and you know what's funny because in the grand scheme of things, I make this joke. It's funny. I use South Dakota as an example. I say that, you know, if 35 years after I graduated, I could still, if I was living in South Dakota and 35 years after I graduated, I could still see my high school from where I was living. It might mean, you know, you might want to get out and do something with your life. I live in Midtown Manhattan. I can still, out of my high-rise window here, I can still see my high school 35 years later. That doesn't mean I've done nothing, quite the opposite, you know? So it's just so funny how everything comes full circle and how things work. It really always cracks me up. I'm very lucky with what I do.
Yeah, and I don't live in my hometown, but we live in my wife's hometown, and now she works at the school that she went to school at. She's a special education teacher, and you know, and she loves it. And for me, I've been all over. I might have grown up in South Dakota, but you know, at 18, I read Kerouac's On the Road, and already being a guitar player at that point, I was like, yeah, I think I'm just going to throw this thing on my back and hit the West Coast. And I'd done that. And I was selling magazines door to door. And, you know, I spent a year in Mexico, you know, on the run from some legal troubles. And I've lived this massive life. And for me to kind of come back now and to live the small town life where I get to walk my wife to school, you know, my kids to school, and my wife to work every day, and to be very small, but I still get to go out on the road and tour, and I get to visit these major markets and hang out. I would never want to live there. You know, our mortgage is $600 a month. I prefer that.
I was hoping you wouldn't tell me what your mortgage is. Yeah. And you probably you're probably recording this in your podcasting room, which is a separate room with a door. I can, there's my dog, there's my couch, there's my kitchen, I mean, and
Yeah,
in
it's
your,
actually
by
in
your standards,
my detached garage in my backyard, which I know that no one in New York City knows what that
well,
is.
we do have Central Park.
There you go. Everybody's backyard. No, it's a different lifestyle. And, because of things like what you've built with Source of Sources and, obviously with your previous, which also a member of that one, but don't get nearly the traction there as I did I did not expect a response that quickly. I did not expect it, and I really wasn't sure of how it did. It was just like, well, I'm in this group. I want to submit a query. I'm always looking for entertainers to talk to. And it was within minutes. Yeah. Within minutes of seeing the email go out with my query in it and immediately getting responses like, oh, this thing works and works really well. Be good. This is a powerful tool. Be careful how you use it because, you already have a busy schedule, sir. So let's not, and not to flood what you're doing, but it's incredible. It's incredible to see it work, the daily emails that go out and to see everyone who's looking for it. And I'm going to be more than willing to answer any of those for, things that I fit in. And it's really become a really, a vital part of my morning to kind of get out there and to see what other people are talking about. Right, from a national perspective, because my local paper isn't covering a lot of lifestyle and different things, I mean, obviously they're covering the town and what's happening at the high school sports and that. So it's nice for me to kind of tap into what's happening at the national level. What are people interested in for these major publications? And then when we're ready to kind of put ourselves out there for when we have something big to share, I imagine that someone can use it in that aspect as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's really sort of more one way from journalist to source for the journalist looking for the source. But the nice thing is once you start using it, you start to get an understanding of what these journalists are looking for, and you can go directly to. You don't have to use my service to pitch to them directly. So there's definitely sort of a win on both sides.
It's incredible. I mean, obviously, I know that you never saw your life panning out like this 35 years ago, but you seem very happy with what you've built. And obviously you wouldn't have done it again. Having built it, sold it, you obviously enjoy the community building part of it, right? Is there, kind of talk about that, because I'm the same way. I don't even really know what I'm doing. It's just, it's who I am. I'm always talking to someone. My wife laughs because she's not like that at all. And she's like you will find someone to talk to everywhere we go. And, now it's kind of part of my job, but talk about that aspect and the passion for that specifically.
Well, I'm a massive ADHD, right? So because of that, I talk to everyone. And when I realized that I actually could be a gift if I just shut up for a while and listened, that's where things started really blowing up. When I understood that I could actually, that's what created this amazing database. That's what gets me the people in my life, oh, call this guy or call that guy. Everyone wants to be that guy that has a guy for whatever it is you need. I have a lot of guys and girls, people who I know who have, I've met in one way or another, usually on an airplane or, at a hotel lobby or whatever. And from that, it's nice to have those connections. And my logic has always been, if you've had any modicum of success in your life, you have a responsibility to send the elevator back down. And I truly believe that. And so I've always tried to do that. My first company, all my companies have really been trying to help people. I've written several books on ADHD and sort of how I use it to my advantage. And one that I wrote about 9 years ago is still in print and still being printed, called Faster Than Normal, published by Random House. And at least 2 or 3 times a week, I get an email from people. Oh my God, this is the first book I've ever read that tells me I'm not broken, and thank you so much. There's enough, pardon the expression, bad shit in the world. If you have the ability to put out some good stuff, you really should.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, obviously, I'm running this show, producing it myself on StreamYard. I do this. I have 13 shows on my 4 networks, and probably doing too much. And a lot of people couldn't handle one of these. But it's very important to me to kind of use that as a superpower. If you have the ability to do all of these things, this morning I was editing a video for a show we have coming up on Valentine's Day and doing that. And then I'm getting behind the camera and doing this and producing the show. And later today, I'll have meetings on this. I'm wearing many hats all the time. I never considered a detriment. Now, I've never been diagnosed ADHD, but they put me in gifted classes when I was in second grade because they're like, look, you can't just talk to everyone. Tested in the top 1 percentile on our standardized testing in second grade. And they were like, look, okay, this boy, and they called us gifted back then. They didn't call us and put a label on it and try to pump us full of drugs in the 90s. They were like, hey, we're going to give him algebra homework in second, third grade. And and then when we moved to South Dakota, and probably the reason I started getting into a lot of trouble is that I went back to like remedial classes and there wasn't those resources then to push me where I needed to. I'm finishing my homework in 2 minutes. Everybody else is still working on it. And I'm not being challenged. And I feel like it's so important these days to let people know that like you are not broken just because you operate differently than what the standards of society are. It's just that no one's told you that you're special in a good way, not like,
not short bus special
off the wall.
So I wrote a kid's book called The Boy with the Faster Brain. And the premise behind that is exactly that. It's about a 12-year-old kid named Peter who keeps getting sent home with notes from the teacher and constantly in trouble and all that. And his parents finally take him to see a therapist, and the therapist learns that, the kid is incredible in math, in the stuff that he loves, English or whatever. But when it comes to subjects he doesn't love, he's not that great. And he discovers his brain works a little faster, right? So it was a great way to sort of teach these kids, hey, you're not broken, because, I was told by teachers that I was broken from age 5. That it wasn't called ADHD in the 70s and 80s in New York City public school systems. It was called sit down, you're disrupting the class. And so when you spend the first 20 years of your life being told you're broken, you spend the next 30 in therapy trying to undo that. So if I can help one kid not have to do that and maybe start a little earlier and to understand they're great, that's a win all around. So that's kind of why I do what I do.
I think my cat has ADHD. She's knocking over everything. She's getting a little stir crazy.
All cats have ADHD, but they also don't give a shit. I've had cats my whole life, and they literally watch you, and I'll be sitting there, and the cat will be right on the counter, staring at me as she knocks a glass mug off the counter and watches it shatter. Just stares at like, what are you gonna do? You're not gonna do anything. Sit there.
So what are you gonna do? Throw me out? Yeah, you're gonna not feed me.
Exactly. Yeah. Now thanks to my daughter, I have a rescue dog who has been trained by the cat, and essentially I've never met a dog who, when you get out of bed, pulls the covers up and stays in bed. He's a cat. He's literally sleeping on the couch right here. It's amazing.
So great. Well, I know that you're doing, you're a public speaker. You obviously have all of the books and everywhere. Is there a website that people can find out about that? And then obviously pitch Source of Sources as well.
Sure. So Source of Sources is just sourceofsources.com. You can sign up there. It's totally free. My life is at shankman.com, shankman.com, just my last name. I'm at Peter Shankman on all the socials except for Twitter. I gave that up about 3 years ago because it's ick. But I'm everywhere else. I have a pretty big Instagram, which tend to be either me complaining about training for some triathlon or marathon or bodybuilding something, or reels of me traveling with my daughter. So I try to have a lot of fun. But yeah, I'm very easily available online. You can find me. And I do respond to all my own emails. My assistant doesn't let me book my own calendar, but I do respond to all my own emails.
Fantastic. Well, Peter, I appreciate Source of Sources. I think it's a great platform. I appreciate you taking some time out of your busy life to chat with me and, just a little podcaster here in rural South Dakota. But I'm really appreciative of what you've built. And I was so happy to have just a few minutes to let you share a little bit of your story and to talk about your platform. So any of our media people that are watching, musicians and stuff as well, who I'm always encouraging to start their own podcast, to get out there. And this is how you build your career, by building a network of people that, will care about you. And that's what's been so exciting about working on Source of Sources is there's some really interesting people on there already that are interested in what you have to offer to the world. And it's been a blessing to me. So Peter, thank you for taking some time for me today. And thank you for being part of the scene.
My pleasure. Thanks so much for having me.